we've reached the end of Avatar spoilers, but today we've got a couple of absurd black mythics, what is probably the most busted lesson from the entire set, and so much more, so let's break it down. Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for one final daily dose of Avatar spoilers. So we've reached the end of spoiler season. The full set is out, and check it out over at MTGpreviews.com. But we actually still have some really sweet cards to talk about today. We got a couple of mythics left, some spicy rares, a pretty busted uncommon lesson, which means we should probably jump right into it, start talking sweet new Avatar cards. Before we do, 3 quick reminders. First, if you need any of these cards, you can snag them from our sponsor Card Kingdom over at cardkingdom.com/MTGGoldfish. Second, to keep up on all the latest previews throughout the day, you should head on over to MTGpreviews.com. Third, even though we're done with spoiler season, there is still a ton of Avatar to come. So over the next few weeks, we're going to have lots of gameplay. We're going to have podcasts. Next Wednesday's early access. We'll be playing over on Twitch, checking out the cards early at twitch.tv/MTGGoldfish. So if you want more Avatar, don't worry. Even though we're done with spoilers, there is still a bunch to come. But anyway, let's talk one last time about some sweet Avatar spoilers. First up today, we get one of the final 2 mythics from the set, and it is a sweet one in Ko the Face Stealer. So Ko is a 6 mana black 6/6 legendary shapeshifter spirit. It says when it enters, exile up to 1 target other creature. So the floor in the card, 6 mana creature based removal spell with a big body, which is perfectly fine, at least in Commander. If it was like 10 years ago, it'd probably be good enough for Standard. I worry a little bit that at 6 mana, it might just be too slow for 2025 Standard, but still, even played fairly, just a 6-drop 6/6 that exiles the best thing on the battlefield, a pretty powerful effect, but it gets better. It says whenever another non-token creature dies, you may exile it, and then you can pay a life and choose a creature card exiled with Ko, and Ko has all the activated and triggered abilities of the last chosen card. So Ko is kind of wild. If you think about what this is, it's essentially like a duplicate effect, right? Where you are able to just play the 6-drop that exiles the best thing on the battlefield, but then it's also kind of like a Kalitas. I want to show Kalitas because there is an important distinction here. Ko is not a replacement effect. When a non-token creature dies, it doesn't just instead go to exile. Instead, it'll go to the graveyard, and you'll get an option if you would like to exile it to use it with Ko's ability. So it's not going to shut down death triggers like Kalitas does. So it's not going to exactly work like a hate card there, but that's fine because the real purpose of the card is to be this weird combo piece, kind of like Dark Imposter, except Dark Imposter kind of sucks because it's 1,000,000 mana, maybe a Necrotic Ooze or a Quicksilver Elemental. So what do we do with Ko? And I think level 1 is you can just play this card fairly. And again, we'll have to wait and see if Standard is in a place where you can actually just play a 6-drop. It might not be, like 6-drop is kind of a tough sell, but the dream is you just play this and exile something good of your opponents that has a powerful activated or triggered ability. So for example, and thankfully this card should be banned by the time that Ko comes out, unless Wizards really messes stuff up on Monday, but it works insanely well against VV Ornithir. Like, you play Ko, you exile the VV, then you could pay a life and give Ko VV's ability, so you can pay 0 and make 6 mana equal to Ko's power, so essentially get a free Ko, assuming you can use the mana that it makes that's red and blue from VV's ability. But thankfully VV should be gone by the time that Ko comes out. But even like Enduring Curiosity, you play the Ko, you exile Enduring Curiosity, so it's gone forever, then you can pay a life and give Ko Enduring Curiosity's ability, so whenever you deal combat damage, you get to draw a card, and then if Ko dies, you get to return it to play as an enchantment with all of its abilities still. Even just hitting like a Lord Skitter, so you can make rats and exile the graveyard, or a Razorkin Needlehead, so you damage your opponent when they draw cards, seems kind of fine with Ko. So played fairly, I actually think the card is pretty good. There's just so many strong activated and triggered abilities that even if you're not really building around this and trying to combo off, Ko actually seems pretty strong. However, it's also a combo piece, and I will say, there are 2 big challenges with comboing with Ko, which probably means it's more of an against the odds card or a commander card. So what are the challenges of comboing with Ko? Challenge number 1 is, compared to something like Necrotic Ooze, which just gets the abilities of anything in the graveyard, it's actually going to be kind of tricky to get multiple combo pieces exiled with Ko, because the only way to get things exiled with Ko is first, someone has to put them on the battlefield, and then you either have to play Ko and exile them with its enters triggers, or it has to die. So you can't just like mill him over or whatever and get its abilities. So that's going to be a bit of a challenge. The other challenge is most of the combos involve using the pay 1 life to switch into another creature's activating and triggered abilities a bunch of times. So a lot of these combos are not going to be truly infinite because eventually you're going to run out of life from paying 1 life to Ko's ability, but hopefully they generate enough value that you win the game before you run out of life to Ko. So what kind of combos do we have for this card? And one of the easiest things to look for is Ko combos with a creature that can untap itself and a creature that taps to make a lot of mana. So in standard, for example, Sleep Curse Fairy untaps itself for 2 mana. Zavala Eager Trailblazer taps to make mana equal to the number of differently powered creatures you control. So exactly how much depends on the board state, but let's say it makes 4 mana. You tap it to make 4 mana. So if you could get both of these exiled to Ko, you could pay a life to give Ko Zavala's abilities, tap it to make 4 mana, then you can pay a life, switch into Sleep Curse Fairy's abilities, untap it with 2 of that mana, then pay a life, switch back to Zavala, tap it to make 4 mana, then you pay a life, switch back into Sleep Curse Fairy, untap it for 2 mana. Essentially every time through the loop you make 2 extra mana, you do it until you're down to 1 life, and you use all that extra mana to win the game with whatever, some big burn spell, whatever your finisher is. So that's an example of how you can combo in standard. There's also like Rainville Rejuvenator, a creature that taps to make green mana equal to its power. So this could do the same thing, except the problem is it makes green mana and Sleep Curse Fairy needs blue mana. But if you add Agatha's Soul Cauldron into the mix, so we can activate abilities with any colors of mana, then you can do the same combo there. So those are the kind of things you're looking for. Once you get back to Commander, this card has some shenanigans. Maybe my favorite is exiling some sort of unblockable creature like Gingerbrew, or a creature that can give itself unblockable like Gingerbrew, and then fades the untouchable. And then what you can do is pay a life, give Ko Gingerbrew's ability, so you can essentially make it unblockable. Then you can swing at your opponent after blocks are declared, and your opponent can't block your Gingerbrew Ko. Then you're like, okay, I'm going to pay 1 life and give it Phage's ability, so then when the Ko hits your opponent, Phage's you lose the game trigger will happen, and your opponent will just die on the spot. So those are the kind of shenanigans this card can pull off. Really, in Commander, if you think of combos that you could do with Mimeoplasm Revered One, Volrath the Shapeshieler, Necrotic Use, Maricel the Pretender, you can probably do them with Ko, assuming you can get the right cards exiled with Ko, which is still a challenge compared to a lot of these other cards. Maybe my favorite combo, if Ko is your commander, well, outside of the Phage combo, is Asmodeus with Scourge Familiar. So Asmodeus has this ability where you can pay 3 black mana to draw 7 cards. The problem is it has this weird static ability where if you draw a card, it goes to exile instead, then you gotta pay a mana to get the cards from exile in your hand and lose a bunch of life. So if you have both of these cards exiled to Ko, what you can do is pay a life to give Ko Asmodeus's ability, then you pay 3 mana to draw 7 cards. With that trigger on the stack to draw 7 cards, you pay a life, switch over to Scourge Familiar's ability, so you avoid all the downsides of Asmodeus. You draw the 7 cards, and then you can use Scourge Familiar to discard, let's say 4 or 5 of those cards. Keep your couple best cards, discard 4 or 5 to make 4 or 5 mana. Then you can pay a life, switch back to Asmodeus's ability again, pay 3 of that mana to draw 7 more cards. Again, with the trigger on the stack, switch back to Scourge Familiar, then you can discard those cards to make mana. Essentially make infinite mana. You draw through your deck. You should be able to win the game before you run out of life with Ko. So it seems pretty powerful. There's also the old like Phyrexian Devour Walking Ballista combos. Phyrexian Devour has this ability where you can pay 0 to exile the top card of your library and put X+1/+1 counters on it equal to the card's mana value. And then Walking Ballista, of course, you can remove a counter from it to deal a damage. Same with Triskelion. So if you can get a Phyrexian Devour in either Walking Ballista or Triskelion exiled to Ko, then you can pay 1 life, switch into Devour's ability, activate the 0 ability a whole bunch of times, and then just switch into Walking Ballista and remove all those counters to kill your opponents on the spot, just burn everyone out of the game. So there's a lot of ways this card can just kill everyone super quick. It's also pretty sweet with stuff like Rowan Cyanivore. The other upside of this card is it is a card that can lose all of your life if you want to. If you just care about losing life, Ko's really good at getting that job done, because even if you don't care what creature you're switching into, you can just pay 1 life to choose a creature exiled with it, all the way down to 1 life. So if you're playing Rowan Cyanivore, which taps to make your spells that are red or black cost X less, where X is the amount of life you lost this turn, you can like play Ko, pay all the way down to 1 life, tap Rowan to make a ridiculous discount on your spells, and then exsanguinate for like 40 or something and gain back way more life than you ever spent. It's also a cool like life swap commander. You got Repay in Kind, Magus of the Mirror. You can even give Magus of the Mirror's ability if you wanted to, but you can pay down to 1 life and then put everyone down to 1 life, or pay down to 1 life and then swap life totals with someone and then gut shot your opponent for lethal after you put him down to 1 life. So call the Face Stealer. I love this card. This card is super cool. I do think it's going to be tricky to combo with just because getting 2 different pieces, 3 different pieces in exile might be a bit of a challenge. But this card, its base level is fine. It's a 6-mana 6/6 creature exile-based removal spell. And then when you add in all the funky synergies and weird combos, I just absolutely love it. Worst case, the card seems like a really fun commander. And I actually think there's some potential it could be good in standard too, either as a fair card or worst case, as a funny against odds combo piece. Speaking of black cards, we also got the black rare land from the cycle in Realm of Co. So Realm of Co. enters tapped unless you have a basic. It taps to add black, and then for 4 you can tap it and make a 1/1 colorless spirit creature token. With this creature can't block or be blocked by non-spirit creatures. And I gotta say, I think this card's actually not very good. It compares to Castle Ardenvale or Fountain Port, lands that can make a 1/1 creature token. Normally these cards, like Castle Ardenvale, Fountain Port, they're usually used defensively, right? You make a fish or a human so you can chump block a big threat and keep your life total high while you're setting up whatever your finisher is. Because the spirits can't block or be blocked by non-spirit creatures, it's going to be much harder to do. I guess if you're up against spirits, you can use them defensively, but really they're purely an offensive threat. It's nice that they're pseudo unblockable, but they're not going to work like a Castle Ardenvale or a Fountain Port on defense. So this is going to go in very different decks. It also looks kind of bared compared to Ba Sing Se, which makes a 2/2 for 4 total mana. This is making a 1/1 that can't even block or be blocked for 5 total mana. So it looks a little bit bad compared to the agreed member of the cycle, but I think this card, if it's gonna work, it's like a Castle Ardenvale for aggro deck. So if you're just super aggro and you don't really care too much about being able to block with the tokens, then I think the card's fine. I mean, it makes colored mana, assuming you have a bunch of basics in your deck, it should come into play untapped. So if you're playing some sort of like mono black deck, even like a Dimir deck, this is a way that you can close out a game after a Wrath. Like I would play this in a mono black aggro deck with the idea being, okay, once you deal with my other threats, I can use Realm of Co as a repeatable source of creatures, not to play defense with, but to force through those last few points of damage and kill you. So I think that's the role of this card. It's like Castle Ardenvale, but for black aggro decks, rather than for blue-white control style decks. In Commander, it's even better if you're playing a spirit deck, because then maybe you have some synergies to like pump the spirits. There's not a ton of black spirit decks, but Anami Death Aspect, Okagachi Vengeful Kami can be a spirit commander, Thales makes a bunch of spirit tokens. So if you're a spirit deck that's in black, then I think this card goes up in value even more. I'll also say that in Commander, I think you can play this in like any black deck. Like, I don't think it's going to be great, but I think it's fine. I guess there's a little cost because of Cabal coffers, not really wanting a ton of non-basics, but Urborg can get around that. But I think it goes up in value even more if you're a sacrifice-based mono black deck, like Sephiroth or Raids or Yawgmoth. Being a sack deck is another way that you can make those spirit tokens that aren't going to be good at blocking even more valuable, because worst case, even if they can't play defense, you can always sack them to, Sephiroth to draw a card, or Braids to draw a card, or Yawgmoth to put a counter on something and draw a card. So Realm of Co, the fact that the tokens essentially can't block is going to limit the number of decks that can go in, but in some sort of like black aggro deck or sacrifice deck, where you're more interested in using your lands to close out the game and fight through removal, I think the card is still perfectly fine. Apparently it is Black Mythic Day, because our last Mythic from the set is also a black one, and it is a fun one in Phoenix Fleet Airship. So a 4-mana 4/4 vehicle. It's a black card, it is flying. It says, at the beginning of your end step, if you sacked a permanent this turn, create a token that's a copy of this vehicle, and then as long as you control 8 or more permanents named Phoenix Fleet Airship, the vehicle is an artifact creature, or you can crew it for 1. So Phoenix Fleet Airship, it has flying, which is a big deal. We've talked before about how the best vehicles in Constructed tend to have flying, although if you compare this to other 4/4 flying vehicles, it is kind of expensive. Like, we have Thopter Fabricator in Standard right now, 3-mana 4/4 flying vehicle, cruise for 2. Heart of Kirin was really good in its era, 2-mana 4/4 flying vigilant vehicle that crewed for 3, or by removing loyalty from Planeswalkers. Compared to other vehicles, a 4-mana 4/4 flying with crew 1 is a little bit expensive, a little bit more than you'd expect to pay, but Phoenix Fleet Airship makes up for this with another reason, which is hopefully you don't just have one Phoenix Fleet Airship. This is kind of a vehicle swarm in a weird way, where rather than triggering based on landfall, it triggers on your end step, assuming you sacked anything during your turn. Something as simple as cracking a fetch land will let you trigger the Phoenix Fleet Airship, and once this gets going, it gets kind of wild. So imagine the dream in Standard is you play something on turn 2 that makes a treasure, like a Charming Scoundrel, Treasure Dredger can do it, Generous Plunderer can do it, so something that makes a treasure. Then on turn 3, you sack the treasure, you play a Phoenix Fleet Airship, you go to your end step, you make another Phoenix Fleet Airship, so now you have 2 of them, which means the next turn on turn 4, assuming you can sack a treasure, a fabled passage, whatever, you go to your end step, now you have 2 Phoenix Fleet Airships that are going to be like, hey, you sack something, I'm going to make a copy of myself. Then you go up to 4. Then the next turn, turn 5, you potentially go up to 8 of them if you do the same thing. And once you get up to 8, all of a sudden, you don't got to worry about crewing these. They just become this actual fleet of flying vehicles that are just going to kill your opponent super, super quickly. 32 at least flying power in the air. So the fact that they snowball so hard from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 60 to 32 actually makes this card very exciting to build around. Again, is it going to be like a super competitive Standard plan? You're starting at 4 mana. It takes a bunch of turns to get going. So it might be more of like a fun me deck than like a top tier Standard thing, but it can get really powerful if you can keep it going for a few turns. As I mentioned before, it works with any sacrifice, right? So you crack a Fabled Passage or a Valving Wild, or if you're playing an actual sack deck like Umbral Collar Zealot shenanigans, it gets even easier. In older formats, I'm intrigued to try this in Pioneer Doom Foretold. Doom Foretold, just at the beginning of each player's upkeep, makes that player sack a non-land, non-token permanent. So if you have a Phoenix Fleet Airship, you can just sacrifice something to start making multiple Phoenix Fleet Airships, and then once you get going, you can always just sack a Phoenix Fleet Airship because you're going to make more Phoenix Fleet Airships. So it kind of keeps Doom Foretold going all by itself, which is pretty sweet. In Commander, I think there's a few different homes for the card. So the best home is probably Edward Kenaway, since it is not just a vehicle deck, but it's a vehicle deck that makes treasure tokens, so you always have sacrifice fodder for the Phoenix Fleet Airship. But I think it's good in pretty much any vehicle deck, like you play it in Greasefang or whatever, and just trust that your fetch lands or whatever random synergies you're playing are going to give you the stuff to sacrifice to make more Phoenix Fleet Airships. It's also good in pretty much any sack deck. Brea's like an artifact sack deck, but Corvald or Chatterfang, decks where you're sacking every turn anyway, this is a lot of free value. Not only does it just give you more Phoenix Fleet Airships, but that also means you're getting more sacrifice fodder to work with your commander. It's also sweet in treasure decks. Treasure decks, you might not care about a vehicle, but you're always going to have a treasure that you can sacrifice to keep the airship snowball going. So if you're playing Mr. House or Prosper or Beyond, I think it's actually very good there as well. Also worth mentioning, it's one of the cutest ways to win with mechanized production. Mech Pro, 4 mana enchant me, put it on an artifact, and the beginning of your upkeep, you create a token that's a copy of it. Then if you have 8 or more artifacts with the same name, you'll win the game. So Phoenix Fleet Airship goes from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8. So within 4 turns, you get up to 8 copies of it, even all by itself. And then Mech Pro just wins you the game on your upkeep. So Phoenix Fleet Airship, I absolutely love this card. I'm not sure how good it is. Like at 4 mana, is it fast enough for Standard play? We'll have to wait and see if it's actually a competitive card, but I cannot wait to start brewing around it because I love doubling stuff. I love copying stuff, and it actually seems like it could be a pretty legit win con once it gets going. We also got our final Toph, Heardheaded Teacher. A 4 mana Gruul 3/4 legendary human warrior ally. It says when it enters, you can discard a card. If you do, return an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. And then it says whenever you cast a spell, so not even an instant or sorcery spell, just anything, you earthbend 1, and if the spell was a lesson, you put an extra +1/+1 counter on the land. So this Toph, it's kind of like a Shipwreck Dowser style effect. The way you can get a spell back to your hand, yes, you have to discard a card, so it makes it hard to go like infinite with a blink effect or whatever, but still some nice value there, getting your best spell back from your deck. And then it's also kind of like a Talrand or maybe a Noyandar, which actually awakens lands when you cast spells, but with the twist that it works with any spell, not just instant or sorcery spells. So in a lot of ways, it's like a better Talrand, a better Noyandar. One of the things I like about this card is it's essentially a Gruul Spellslinger commander, and Gruul is maybe the least played Spellslinger color combination. Like, the number one commander is Wart the Raid Mother, which is honestly a pretty cool commander, but people, I think, forget about Wart. The second most is the Howling Abomination, which I didn't even realize was a Magic card. So getting a sweet commander for the Gruul Spellslinger archetype is a nice upside. Plus, there's a lot of synergies here. There's a bunch of different ways you can build around this. It's a really cool landfall commander. I think Earthbend is just an inherently powerful landfall effect because you can always sacrifice your Earthbend lands to get them back into play to trigger landfall. So if you play Toph with like Lotus Cobras and Nissa Resurgent Animus and Scoot Swarms, you can do some wild things. You can like play a spell to Earthbend a land, then you can sacrifice the land to something like Zornorb. It comes back into play. You trigger your Lotus Cobra to make a mana. You trigger your Nissa to make a mana. You trigger your Scoot Swarm to make a token. Then you cast another spell using the mana from the Lotus Cobras and the Nissas. That's going to trigger Toph to Earthbend. Then you turn another land into a creature. Then you sack it to the Zoradorb. Then it comes back into play. It triggers all your landfall stuff again. So sneaky landfall synergies too, which might actually be relevant in standard. You could even kind of use it to do the same thing. I guess if you want the sacrifice, you need to play something like Umbral Collar Zealot, which is kind of awkward. So it might be tough to actually fit this into like a Tifa deck. Do you really want to be Jund Tifa rather than 2-color, monocolor? But you can do the same thing. Also worth mentioning, if you want to go really deep with this card, there is a way you can kind of use it to get like almost infinite strip mines, or at least build a one-sided Armageddon out of it. So if you have a strip mine and you cast a spell, while Toph's out, you can turn the strip mine into an Earthbend creature. Then you can sack the strip mine to blow up one of your opponent's lands and put it back into play thanks to Earthbend. The problem is Earthbend puts the lands back into play tapped, but not if you have something like Splunking. If you have a Splunking, your lands are always going to enter untapped, so you can then cast another spell, and then Earthbend the strip mine, and then strip mine another one of your opponent's lands, put it back into play untapped, and then you do it again and again and again until all your opponent's lands are gone. So there's a lot of shenanigans here. I also think in standard, the card might just be fine in an Earthbending deck. Like, if your goal is just to Earthbend as much as possible, because you have Badger Mole Cub, and you really want your lands to be creatures so they make double mana, or you have Boomy, which is going to give you extra combats with your land, Toph seems like the easiest way to just Earthbend your entire mana base. If you just want all your lands to be 1/1 Earthbend creatures, Toph is going to be the easiest way to get that done. So Toph, Heardheaded Teacher, I actually think this card is very powerful. We'll see if it's good enough for standard. I think it might be as some sort of like synergy combo Earthbend piece. Worst case, a unique commander bringing some spell slinging shenanigans into Gruul, and a really synergistic weird landfall sacrifice commander. We also got a new Orzhov 2-drop in Sandbender Scavengers, which is actually kind of sweet for a sack deck. So it's an Orzhov 2-mana 1/1. It says when you sack another permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. And then when this creature dies, you can exile it. When you do, return target creature card with mana value less than or equal to this creature's power from your graveyard to the battlefield. So Sandbender Scavengers, it's kind of like a Blood Aspirant, the same mana cost and ability, right? Where when you sacrifice something, it's a +1/+1 counter, but mixed with, I guess, a Gurgling Anointer with the death trigger being able to reanimate something when it dies. And I think this card, you wouldn't just play it fairly. If you're just playing a generic deck, there's better 2-drops that you can play. But I think this card might actually be really good in a sack deck. Like, think of a Sephiroth style deck. You can play this, and you can sacrifice, I don't know, Infestation Sage, and then the token it makes to get a couple counters on it. And then if you don't have your Sephiroth, you can always sacrifice the Sandbender Scavengers to get back a Sephiroth that died to the battlefield. Or when this dies, you get back your Umbral Collar Zealot. Or an even simpler example, just imagine you sacrifice your Infestation Sage, trigger Sephiroth, sack the token, trigger Sephiroth, sacrifice the Sandbender Scavengers, trigger Sephiroth, get back the Infestation Sage, sack it again, sack the token again. That's like 5 Sephiroth triggers with just 2 actual creatures dying. So I think in a sack deck, the card's really good. Otherwise, probably not going to be good enough. In older formats, I don't actually expect this to make it. I guess maybe in a sack deck, it could if you're doing like sack loops, Gravecrawler loops, Cauldron Familiar shenanigans. But it's worth noting that it does trigger on fetch lands too. It's any permanent leaving the battlefield, which is pretty strong. We also got our final ally from the set, Wartime Protestors, a 4-mana 4/4 hasty human rebel ally. It says whenever another ally you control enters, which I gotta say, that line of text kind of makes me sad because allies say whenever this creature or another ally enters, wizards. But yes, whenever another ally enters, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature and it gains haste until end of turn. So Wartime Protestors, it's essentially first day of class, but on a body that only works with allies. Also kind of reminds me of Chasm Guide, is the haste granting ally. Although Chasm Guide, when it or another ally enters, just gave all your creatures haste. Wartime Protestors only works with creatures that enter after it comes into play, but you get a +1/+1 counter as a bonus. So I think Wartime Protestors, it's good enough for ally decks. It also has like kind of a reasonable body, right? I mean, 4 mana, 4/4 haste isn't bad. It's like Axebane Ferox, which has seen played before. So it's not like you're way below the curve on stats. But I think this card, I would play it in basically any ally deck. I think it's just good enough. In Commander, I'm talking about, like General Tazri, but it's probably at its best in Sokka and Suki, where Sokka and Suki, when an ally enters, you can attach an equipment to it. And when equipment enters, you can make an ally. So if you have Wartime Protestors, you can like play an equipment to make an ally, maybe a Colossal Hammer, put the equipment on the ally, and then give the ally haste with Wartime Protestors and smashing for a huge amount of damage right away. So Wartime Protestors, another ally card that, if you're playing allies, pretty good in your deck. If you're not playing allies, you really got no interest in it. As far as lower rarity cards, we got a few that deserve a mention. I'll also say they did preview the rest of the Jumpstart cards, the Commander chaff that's not actually legal for Standard. We're not going to get into all of them. There's a bunch of them, but you can check them out over on MTGpreviews.com. But as far as lower rarity cards, we start with Curious Farm Animals, a 1-mana 1/1 boar, elk, bird, ox. That is a lot of creature types. It says when it dies, you gain 3 life, and you pay 2 sack it to destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. So I actually think that this card could be a good sideboard option. Insidious Fungus is a card that I have played in Standard decks several times before, and it's perfectly fine. Curious Farm Animals, kind of similar. You do give up the pay 2 sack it to draw a card and put a land into play, so you don't get the rat mode, but you get the upside of gaining 3 life. And I feel like in some sort of white creature deck, a card that's 1 mana, pay 2 sack it, blow up an artifact and enchantment, and you gain 3 life might actually be kind of fine. So I think it could be a good sideboard option at least. We also got a card that I think might be kind of broken. Accumulate Wisdom. 2 mana instant lesson. It says look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of those cards in your hand, the rest in the bottom of your library in any order. Then put each of those cards in your hand instead if there are 3 or more lessons in your graveyard. So Accumulate Wisdom, it is literally Anticipate, straight up Anticipate that's a lesson. And I know Anticipate doesn't see heavy play right now, but it wasn't that long ago that people actually unironically played Anticipate in their decks. It's like not that far away from being okay. It's just not as good as like Consult the Star Charts or whatever. But Anticipate's a fine baseline. It's not like an embarrassing card to have in your deck. The exciting part is if you get 3 or more lessons in your graveyard, you get a 2 mana Ancestral Recall, like literally 2 mana instant speed draw 3, which is incredibly powerful to the point where I think that ability is actually probably strong enough to build a deck around. Like if lessons are a thing in Standard, I don't think it's because 6 mana Iroh or whatever. I think it's because Accumulated Wisdom is so busted. And if you look at the cheap lessons, I can definitely see some sort of, especially Is It deck, they could actually turn this on very consistently without playing a bunch of bad cards. Like, let's just stick to Is It. We also got Firebending Lesson, a new 1 mana instant lesson that's 2 damage to a creature. You can kick it for 4 for 5 damage instead. That card's fine removal. Iroh's Demonstration's fine removal. Combustion Technique, especially in a lesson-based deck, is good removal. Abandoned Enchantments give you like a Tormenting Voice style effect where you can discard a card to draw a couple of cards. So it seems pretty realistic to me that you could build an Is It Lessons deck that would turn this on really consistently. And then if you're in other colors, you get like Enter the Avatar State, Shared Roots, Airbending Lesson. So I actually think there could be a lesson deck that could make use of Accumulate Wisdom. And this will be like the best card in the deck. And the thing I love about the card is the floor is fine. Like in the early game, if you just got to dig for a land, casting and Anticipate is not the end of the world. And then when you're drawing 3 with this, it is straight up busted. Plus, you can always get lessons in the graveyard in other ways too. You don't necessarily have to cast them. You can Tursa them or cash grab to fill your graveyard. So I think Accumulate Wisdom, I don't think lessons are strong enough, probably, for this to break into older formats, but I'm actually very excited about a blue-red lesson deck in Standard. Kind of sad because we've been in Is It domination for so long that I just don't know if people care about Is It decks anymore because it's dominated for like a year now. And Is It's probably going to be the best color combination for this card, but I do think this card's really good, and I'm excited to build Is It lessons. We also got Nomad Legacy, a 2-mana Azorius enchantment. This is when it enters, you make a clue, and then creatures you control with flying get +1/+1. So Nomad Legacy calls back to a infamous budget card. We have played Favorable Winds many times in the past. Just a 2-mana blue enchantment. This is creatures you control with flying get +1/+1. This is Favorable Winds in 2 colors, but you get a clue token as a bonus. And I think we could probably build a good budget deck out of this. If you just look at the flyers we have in Standard, Spectral Sailor, Spyglass Siren, Nurturing Pixie, Mockingbird, Healer's Hawk, and this is just the 1-drops. I could definitely see a deck where you just like play all these cheap flyers, drop Nomad's Legacy to buff them, and try to kill your opponent in the air before they can recover. So I think as an upgraded Favorable Winds, I actually like the card, and we have plenty of pieces in Standard to make it work. We also got some more land destruction in Meteor Sword, a 7-mana equipment that when it enters, destroy target permanent, not even non-land permanent, any permanent. And then it gives equip creature +3/+3, and you can equip it for 3. Don't really care about that part. Just a 7-mana artifact that can blow up a land is kind of exciting because we don't really get land destruction anymore. So this is similar to Meteor Golem or Spine of Isha, these 7-mana colorless removal spells. In Standard, it lines up with Extinguisher Battleship. Now we can Meteor Sword on 7, Battleship at 8, blow up a land, blow up a land. Really good with Doppelgang, another thing you can copy to just blow up all your opponent's permanents. So we might have to do some more Doppelganging now that we have Meteor Sword around to up the consistency of the deck. It's also cute in older formats, especially in equipment deck. If you're playing Commander or whatever, I think this card's good in colorless decks, just as another Spine of Isha. And then it's good in equipment decks where you can Stoneforge it, maybe cheat it into play on the cheap. You still blow up the permanent, even in like a format like Modern. And I don't think this will probably happen because of consistency issues. But with Stoneforge, if you can Stoneforge on 2, tutor this up, turn 3, put it into play, blow up one of your opponent's lands, that's actually a pretty powerful line. So Meteor Sword, I could actually care less about giving equip creature +3/+3. I don't think I'm ever going to put this on one of my creatures, but just a 7-mana artifact that could blow up anything, including a land when it enters, is actually pretty sweet. We also got another silly land with an ability on it in Rumble Arena. So Rumble Arena, a common land with Vigilance. It says when it enters, you scry 1, you can tap it for a colorless, or pay 1 and tap it to make a mana of any color. So this is the second land from the set that has an ability. We saw it on Secret Tunnel, and these lands are to be used with Earthbend, right? If you Earthbend onto this, then you get a Vigilant Earthbend land, which is actually pretty powerful with Earthbend because you can attack with your creature land and then tap it for mana post-combat to still make mana with it. Also a little bit of, I guess, Conduit Pylons. I guess it's not as good because it's Scry rather than Surveil, but a little bit of filtering when it enters as well. So Rumble Arena, maybe in an Earthbend style deck. I don't think you'd play it in just like a generic deck, because in a generic deck, giving you land vigilance doesn't really do anything. But in an Earthbend deck, it could be fun. We also got Zuko's Conviction, a 1-mana instant. This says return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, but you can kick it for 4 more mana, so 5 total mana. If you do, you return the card to the battlefield tapped instead. So Zuko's Conviction is notable, mostly because it's an instant. We do have an instant speed reanimation spell in Standard, which is Live or Die, which is also 5 mana. But Zuko's Conviction, I think it's just a better version, because you can also cast it for 1 mana just to raise that and get something back to your hand. So in the early game, you get value. In the late game, you give it more value by putting the creature into play instant speed. Sadly, the creature being tapped does minimize some of the blowouts you can get. You can't like reanimate something during combat and eat your opponent's attacker, but still, I think this card could have its uses. I don't think it beats out Zombify because overall just being less mana is more powerful, but I do think this might be like in the conversation for next reanimation spell up post Zombify. We also got the rest of the cards from the source material sheet. Value-wise, the big one, hilariously, Tarnished Citadel. If you don't know Tarnished Citadel, It's a land that makes colorless, or you can tap it to make a mana of any color, but it deals 3 damage to you. It's like the most painful City of Brass of all time, but you can get around it by tapping it for colorless mana. But it's a card that sees playing like some high-powered CDH style decks, so it's like $20, even though it looks really bad at first read. Otherwise, a bunch of stuff with, I guess, cool avatar art, but not super high value. Of course, we also got plenty of draft chaff that you can check out and see the full set over at MTGpreviews.com. Anyway, that brings us to the end of our daily avatar spoilers, not just for today, but of the entire spoiler season. So now that we've reached the end, I gotta know what y'all think. What do you think of this set? And I gotta say, I think this set looks awesome. It looks so incredibly good, and I'm feeling very encouraged because honestly, heading into Avatar, I was feeling really down because I thought that Spider-Man was just so bad that it kind of had me shook at the entire idea of Universes Beyond sets and had me thinking that Wizards had just kind of like fully packed it in and was just going full-on cash grab mode and didn't really care if their sets or cards were good because they're just like, hey, we make so much money, we don't even have to make good sets anymore. But Avatar showed me that fear looks to be unfounded because I think of this set as legitimately great. Like on a scale of Spider-Man to Final Fantasy, this is pretty close to the Final Fantasy end. Like I think this is going to go down is one of the better sets of the year and one of the better Universes Beyond sets that Wizards has ever made. So I want to know what you think, but I think this set looks amazing. The flavor's good, but whatever. The important thing is the mechanics look really good. The set looks powerful. There's so many decks I want to build. So I'm really hyped for this set, but let me know what you think in the comments. And of course, even though we're done with spoilers, we're going to have podcasts talking about the best cards from the set. We're going to have gameplay videos. Next Wednesday's early access day, we'll be checking out the set over on Twitch at twitch.tv/MTGGoldfish. So check out all that stuff as well. So thanks for watching the spoiler season, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back after the holidays for some Lorwyn spoilers. So until then, have a great day, and I will talk to you soon. Looking for even more magic? We can find yesterday's spoiler video here, or maybe check out the Against odds, where we played the jankiest and most expensive burn deck that I've ever built.